Welcome back to Lacrosse TV. This is the PLL Week 4 preview. The games are down in Baltimore on Homewood Field, obviously legendary place for lacrosse. Should be a great weekend. 3 of the games are nationally televised, which is obviously huge for the growth of the game. So some exciting stuff to come from this weekend. First game of the weekend, the Lacrosse TV game of the week, New York versus Philadelphia. Key to victory for each team. For New York, midfield scoring. Philly's played stout defense all year long. They're not going to create any offense for New York. Everything's going to have to be earned, not given for this Atlas offense. And I think the best way to do so is through their midfield. This team obviously has had their ups and their downs. A lot of the inconsistency offensively from New York comes from, being one-dimensional offensively. I feel like a lot of the time the ball finds its way to Shelley and to Teat and then, kind of dies there. They'll run a two-man. They'll try to jam it inside to Xander. They'll take a decent shot. But obviously they have so much talent all over their offense. Why don't I want to see Jones and I want to see Costabile find themselves in dodging situations more often to diversify this offense and flatten, their curve of consistency. They're either at their peak or they're at their valley from what we've seen so far. And their peak is so high. If they can just, bring, that bottom line up a little bit, the sky's the limit for this team. Ultimately, I think, if they get more guys the ball, more players dodging, and a bigger group of players scoring, have a bigger box score, they're going to be way more consistent offensively. Teams will have to, prepare completely differently and prepare for more guys than just, their two main games with their attack than in Xander inside. So for Philly, key to victory, face-offs. Stathakis has to hold his own against Baptiste for this team to feel comfortable. I think Philly, ultimately, because of New York's consistency issues that they've had so far, I think Philadelphia is going to feel good about having a lead at some point in this game, but that lead is never going to feel comfortable if Stathakis can't hold his own against Baptiste. This New York offense is so up and down. If Baptiste wins a bunch in a row, this team could score 1 million goals in a row. So I think Philly will find themselves in a lead at some point in this game, and for them to feel comfortable with that lead, Stathakis is going to have to hold his own at the X. My prediction here, I think these teams match up really well. This is my game of the week pick, so I think this is going to be a really exciting game to watch. Could go either way, but I think ultimately because of Philly's consistency, there's just more knowns than there is for New York, and I think Philly's going to take this one. But we're starting a new segment. Look out for a deep dive analysis into this one. I'm going to start picking the game of the week, the game that I think is going to be the best matchup, the most exciting game, and do a deep dive analysis into it, into why I think one team's going to win, what matchups I think are going to be important, what do I think is going to unfold. So keep an eye out for that later. Game 2, Boston versus Maryland, keys to victory. Boston off-ball defense. Boston lost the Philly game last weekend because they couldn't keep up with Philly's off-ball offense. Obviously, last week, this Maryland team, they had that offensive explosion in the second half largely because of what they did off-ball. They were able to get those easy goals that propel you to 12+. I think Boston matches up really well defensively in terms of one-on-one defense, so I think a big deciding factor is, can they staple these cutters? Can they navigate the off-ball picks that, led to Maryland being able to ultimately come back and win their game against New York last week. Maryland, key to victory, pick setting. Last week they capitalized on a New York team that is really offensive minded. They have a lot of, offensive minded midfielders who they asked to play defense. And I think Maryland was able to take advantage of that. New York had guys who maybe weren't as comfortable playing off-ball defense or haven't played as much off-ball defense as, a pro defensive midfielder should. And obviously this is a completely different task with Boston. Off-ball, they're not going to be getting open as much, so they're going to have to win some more matchups. And against this Boston team that is, incredibly skilled and physical in one-on-one defense, it's going to have to come through pick setting. You saw Philly kind of tear Boston's defense apart in the pick game a little bit last week. So I think that this is going to be a huge point of emphasis for this Maryland team if they want to create offensive advantages. My prediction in this one, I think it's going to be a good game. I don't think, anyone's going to run away with it. I think it should be close, but ultimately I just don't see Maryland being able to put up enough goals to keep up with Boston in this one. Give me Boston. Utah versus Denver, keys to victory. Utah control the tempo of this game, keep it slow. I think this starts with possessing the ball offensively, not having turnovers in the early offense, which has obviously been Utah's number one issue. Then being able to possess the ball for 30+ seconds of possession, make Denver's defense work. That defense is going to be tired. They're not going to be able to run transition as well, or they're not going to want to run transition as much, which is how they've been, getting most of their offensive production. Denver's had some problems in 6v6 settled offense. So if, Utah can control the tempo, make Denver's defense work, they're not going to be able to run as good transition, and hopefully lower the transition offense, the unsettled offensive output of this Denver team. For Denver, key to victory, I think it's going to be the performance of the D-middies that really decide this one. Like we just said, this Denver team, they rely a lot on transition offense, or at least they have so far. So Utah, obviously, if they can possess the ball, like I think they will, this game, I think one of their focuses is going to be possessing the ball. Denver's D-middies are going to have a big game. They're going to have to be able to bunker down and play defense, and then play transition offense as well, and have the same caliber of decision making and playmaking that they would if they weren't, playing as much defense. This Utah defense is the best settled defense in the league. Denver needs to run transition. They're going to have to get a little creative in between the lines to find offense. My prediction for this one is a Utah win. I think Denver, like I just said, I think the only way they can win this one is if they, somehow find themselves playing a lot of transition, which I don't think Utah's going to allow unless, they turn the ball over at the rate that they have a couple times already. Obviously, Bates is a vet. This Utah offense has a lot of veterans and a lot of, savvy lacrosse players. I think they're going to understand how they need to get their job done and execute. Carolina versus Maryland, keys to victory. Carolina, get the ball to your new guys. They have Knobloch coming off the IR or the PUP list or whatever they call it. They have Hiltz coming down from Canada finally because they had their bye weekend last weekend, which was the rookie Canadians' first chance to play. Get these guys going early. The number one question in this Carolina team is who are their guys offensively? Who's going to create offense? Who's going to finish offense for them? It's been inconsistent so far in their first 3 games. So I think, get the ball to Nabi, let him initiate from up top. That's what he's good at. Hilt obviously finds the net as good as anyone. I think, before when we were preparing for our quarterfinal game against Syracuse, I remember seeing some stat. I think it was like Hilt has never shot below 30% in his college career or something crazy like that. I think they just need to get these guys the ball, give them the keys to the offense right now. There's no reason not to. This offense needs a spark. So just try to get these guys, get them the ball early, try to get them going, get them meshing early on. For Maryland, face-off play. Nardell is tops of the league right now, coming off a big weekend against Baptiste where he won the matchup. But like we've been saying, teams are 0-3 now in their doubleheader games. I really don't think that that's going to change here. If they want to flip the script and be the first team to win their doubleheader game, Nardell is gonna have to dominate against Rowlett, which objectively he should be able to do. He's had a much better season than Rowlett so far. Being able to win faceoffs and then possess the ball, keep the ball away from Carolina's offense as much as possible. Don't let their new guys get settled in. I think a lot of that's going to come down to this Nardella matchup, but any offensive guy knows that it's really hard to get in a rhythm when you're getting the ball, few and far between. So if they can early on just have a bit of a possession discrepancy, I think, this matchup bodes well for them, especially, considering that Carolina has new guys on offense that haven't really played much together yet. My prediction, I think it's going to be a close, low-scoring game. I do think Carolina is actually going to win this one. Like we alluded to earlier, teams haven't won their doubleheader game yet. Not only that, but they're going to have the least amount of rest as any of the teams who have had double headers because they're playing the second game in the last game rather than the first game in the last game, which every other team has played. I'm not sure why that is. They have less rest than most teams on their doubleheader that haven't won a game. And they're playing Boston, who's arguably the best and most physical team in the league the day before. So I just think Maryland's going to be too beat up. Nardella, we said he has to have a big game. He's playing against Tucci, who we saw last week. He likes to mess dudes up a little bit. Whether or not you win the matchup against Tucci, you're going to feel his presence. And the same goes for this Boston defense. They hit hard, they check hard, and then on offense you have Nolting, who's the most physical dodger in the league. I just don't think Maryland's going to have the energy endurance to take this one, and I think Carolina's going to pull away with the win. All right, ultimately though, my picks in Game 1, Philadelphia to beat New York. Game 2, Boston to beat Maryland. Game 3, Utah to beat Denver. In Game 4, Carolina to beat Maryland. Thank you for tuning in. This was Lacrosse TV PLL Week 4 preview, and we'll see you later this week.